Hello and welcome to the Chris Orwig podcast, the show where we aim to have meaningful and inspiring conversations about topics like the art of living, about creating our best work, becoming our best selves, and making a difference in the world. And as I mentioned before, with everything that's going on in the world, I thought it would be interesting to reach out to some of my friends, mentors, and colleagues and talk with them about everything that's going on and about how they're processing all of that, how they're trying to stay afloat and stay optimistic and even move ahead. And in this week's episode, we're talking with a photographer and friend. Her name is Caroline Jensen. And I have her bio here, and I want to read it because I think it's so fascinating. Caroline Jensen is a photographic artist living on the prairie of southern Minnesota. Already, I love that first line. And she's there with her husband, 4 children, and many pets. She's a natural light photographer specializing in emotive black and white portraiture, macro, and color landscape photography. She does also use lights. Maybe we'll talk about that a little bit. Carolyn seeks to find emotion in every photo and finds her niche in painterly images with dramatic light. She enjoys focusing on one subject, whether that be a person or a flower. Her style, while ornate in processing, strives for a simplicity that guides the viewer's eye to the heart of the image. And I think that is a perfect description of her work. And she's one of those photographers that just draws you into her work. It slows you down. It makes you think. It makes you kind of value these small moments. And so I'm really excited to talk with Carolyn today. So with that in mind, let's jump in. Carolyn, so great to have a chance to chat.
Thank you so much, Chris. It's awesome to be here. Truly. This is really, really neat.
Yeah, it's so fun that we get to connect, even though we're so far away from each other, and we get some time to have an intentional and focused conversation.
Yes, and that never really happens in life. We're so busy all the time, but we've been forced to slow down a little bit in the last few weeks, and this is a great opportunity. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, so let's start off with just kind of checking in. How are you doing? How's the family doing? How is all of this affecting you? And then maybe to add to that question, how are you staying creative and staying optimistic and staying afloat and all those things?
Oh, well, it's kind of funny because I'm such an introvert, actually, that it hasn't been too much of a problem. I've just put my nose to the grindstone and started to do all kinds of projects here at home. I'm like a homebody. I love to garden. I love to do general maintenance around the house. So there's plenty of opportunity to do that. And then I've just been digging into creating hours and hours and hours of content. So I'm very, very busy producing things for down the line. So I've really this has given me the opportunity to speed up what I'm doing because I have less distractions outside of the house.
That's wonderful. Okay, so sorry to jump in, but when you say content, what does that mean, or what does that look like? So tell us about that.
Well, for years, people have been asking me to dig deeper into my photo editing process. And I've taught Lightroom for years, but that's more of a basic raw, process. And people have asked for the more painterly type edits. And some of them, I'm not going to lie, some of them take me 3-4 hours to do. So with this added time and, being homebound, I've been able to, record a lot of deeper editing, going into a lot more in depth with the edits. So I hope to produce that into something meaningful for people.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. So it sounds like for you, it's been an opportunity. Kind of maybe one of the silver lining is that you have now this time to focus, and it is your work does, like you say, it takes time. It seems like you approach things thoughtfully, intentionally, mindfully. Even the word painterly implies that, my grandfather was a painter that.
Oh,
yeah, Sony, and my mom as well, and my aunt. But so
wow.
I have admiration for painters, and sometimes more, well, not sometimes, I'll say more so than photographers. I don't know why, but I think, and here's why, because they commit to a frame.
Yes.
And they take time with it. And so they're always, for me, teaching me like, okay, Chris, in the back of my mind, okay, Chris, slow down, commit to the frame, and take time, because I'm kind of frenetic, moving around, new angles, trying all this stuff. So anyway, so that's neat. That'll be fun to see those tutorials
Yeah.
and see how your process is. Describe to me a little bit of your process of photographing. Let's go to portraiture for a moment. How do you create, capture, think about, and process, all that stuff, portrait?
Wow. Well, when it comes to portraits, it's usually very intentional. There's a reason for the portrait. I'm either wanting to capture, I try to get my kids into my studio at least once a month. And that can be a little contrived at times. And trying to get something natural, I usually have to throw an animal in there or something else to kind of bring the tenor down to a more realistic level, because they give me the cheesy photographer child grin. And other than that, I work with really simple lighting. I've been natural light for 10, 11, 12 years, but recently in the last couple of years, I've started to use LED flex mats. They're from Westcott, and I fake a window. I literally tack it to the wall and put a curtain over it so it looks like a window, so I can make one wherever I want. But then as far as connecting to the subject, it's just trying to get them out of the I'm standing in front of a camera
How do you do that?
mentality.
Yeah, tell us how you do
Just
that.
conversation. Just actually, I learned a lot of it from you.
You're
To
too
be
kind.
honest, no, it's for real. It's for real. I think that I'm terribly uncomfortable in front of the camera when I'm having my photo taken, at least historically. And so I understand how uncomfortable that can all be. And I just try to engage in conversation, and silent shooting is actually brilliant for that, because people don't know when you're shooting, unless it's my daughter who frequently models for me. She travels with me to conferences occasionally, and she wants the shutter to click so she knows what I'm doing. She doesn't want those spontaneous kind of sneaky shots, but normally other people are a lot more relaxed when they're not hearing the click click click.
Yeah, and then just to dig into that a little bit, and we'll talk gear just a touch, and we'll talk about other things. But is that with which camera do you use? What's your tool of
I
choice?
I have 12. I
You
counted
have
them.
12 cameras.
Yeah, I've been
Oh my gosh.
organizing them. I've been organizing them. Well, the thing is it's whatever camera I have. And I go
Okay.
anywhere from the RX10 series, which I often have on me almost 100% of the time, to the A7R4, which obviously is just incredibly gorgeous. And that one with either the 85-1.4 or the 135, depending on the situation, is my like stellar dream one. But I do portraits wherever I am, and a lot of times I just have the point and shoot. So it is whatever it is.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And I use the A7R4 is really my primary one. And what I was only mentioning that just to say that with a lot of these cameras, you can turn them on to silent mode, so there is no
Yeah.
sound with the shutter, just in case people aren't familiar with that. And what that means is when you're looking through the viewfinder, you're pushing the button and no one's hearing anything that's happening. And so models do have a tough time with this because they're trained, knowing it or not, every click to do a different movement. Now, for portrait photographers, I don't like a lot of movement. I like stillness. And so when you go silent, sometimes you can do that, or you can get the unguarded moment or different things. So it is a really interesting way to shoot. And it's I don't know, it changes everything. And what I find, maybe I'm hesitating here because I'm trying to think about it, is a lot of times people have a hard time the first 2 minutes of the shoot, but then they
Yeah.
settle in it. They settle into it. Do you find that as well when you turn off the shutter?
Yeah. Especially if they're involved in activity. I know that you have a very quiet style, and I love it. You're so amazing. I actually prefer more of a documentary type approach when it comes to portraits, and I'm always trying to get them involved in something, and then say they're baking cookies, but then they look up at you with some excitement about what they've done. And that would be the stellar moment I'm looking for, that fun that they're having genuinely in the moment. And I usually use some kind of a prop to facilitate that genuine. I'm such an introverted person. It's hard for me to pull people out of their shell on my own, unless we're having an authentic conversation, a real conversation, sitting on the sofa, drinking tea, and I can say, how are you? And talk to them. But then when I put the camera in the mix, it puts this barrier. So I sometimes find an activity, even if they're just knitting or, doing something that they love, it gets them a little bit more distracted and helps to bring out more genuine interaction.
Yeah, I love that. And thank you for the compliment too. I think your work is amazing as well. So I'll pay you $5 afterwards. Yeah.
No,
But,
I use you as a frequent example of somebody who puts a model at ease. I don't know if did I ever tell you this, Chris? I don't know if I told you. We were in New York and you were going to shoot a model. You had, we could, have a model come out with us outside, and you had a model come out and she kind of started to strike a pose and you said, no, wait, what's your name? Where do you go to school? And all of a sudden I just saw her melt. Like she just, wait, I'm a person. And she started to have a conversation, and then you started to shoot. And it was such a beautiful transition between her getting ready to just strike a pose and do her job to all of a sudden being this person that you were interested in. It was really beautiful to see, and it really stuck with me. And I think I've told that story to lots of people about, especially with models. My daughter works with a lot of models when we're at conferences, and I get to hang around the models a lot. And I've reiterated that story. They always say, oh, I love the photographers that make me feel like a person and not an object. So anyway, that was.
No, that's wonderful. I appreciate that. And, I picked that up from a mentor where I was really had a hard time photographing models. I was nervous, and I don't know why, just for some reason, I mean, this maybe sounds so bad, but I was like, I wanted to photograph real people, which meant a model wasn't a real person, right? But I think it was just that maybe I was intimidated by how beautiful or handsome or something they were. And I wanted real characters. I wanted real life. I wanted realness, everything real. And my mentor, he's since passed away, Rodney Smith, said, Chris, you can turn a model into a person. You ask them a question. And that's, so that is exactly where that came from. And what I've come to find is that you learn so much about people through questions. And it's a lot of times people say, well, what kind of questions? And it's kind of like that story you mentioned. It doesn't have to be, tell me your deepest, darkest secrets or something, or like, it just, you go with these little things. Like maybe one quick story is there was a model at another Sony event we were at who was very tall and striking. And I was photographing her, and I realized how tall she was when I started to try to take her portrait, because I had to get on my tippy toes.
Yeah.
And I said, wow, you're tall, have you, and I'd mentioned I have 3 daughters, and we were talking about that. And I said, well, what age did you hit your height? And she was like, oh, 6th grade. And at the time,
wow.
she was like, I was tall by then. And how was that? It was horrible. Until sports came along. And I said, oh, wow, well, what sports do you play? It's like volleyball, and do you still play? No, I had a full ride scholarship at this college. I broke my back, so I can't play. I got dropped from my parents' insurance plan, and now I'm modeling to pay for my medical bills.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And all of a sudden, striking tall model became a person. And it for me, it afforded me the ability to capture a portrait, because that's, fashion's interesting and clothes are fascinating on all of that. And posing is intriguing and all those things. But for me, it's that real connection. And it wasn't something like, I didn't say, well, what's the worst thing that's happened to you in your life? I broke my back. It was just a very natural way to get there. And if people don't want to get there, I always try to give them space, and that's fine too. But anyway, I love, I love the idea of bringing questions into portraiture.
I think it's brilliant. Yeah. More often than not, lately, I haven't done as many portraits. I do more people that I know, and they're like, I need a headshot for such and such. So it's really more getting them to calm down and not strike every pose that looks a little cheesy, and just get them to be themselves. That can be hard. Or the worst funny story. So my son, who's 22, came to me and he's like, I want you to take my picture, Mom. And I said, okay, that's awesome. We'll get in the studio, say Tuesday. Let's have you come in on Tuesday. He came in, I took a picture, and I was excited because normally he's like in black leather and he's sort of like edgy, and he looked kind of nice and soft. Find out later it's for Tinder.
My gosh.
I'm like, Seriously? Anyway, no. And so I know, and I do corporate headshots occasionally too. I've done corporate headshots for like a bank, so I do that sort of thing, but it's usually kind of a quick, almost like school portraits type situation where you don't really have a lot of time with each person and they just so, but no, I definitely appreciate and love the kind of portraiture that you're talking about where you give the model time to connect.
Yeah, and I want to talk about a little bit about something you said. You're introverted as well, and
Yes.
that helps with connection. And where I want to go with that is oftentimes people think in photography they need to have a certain personality for the type of work they want to do. So maybe if they want to do, I don't know, adventure work, they need to be an adrenaline seeker, or if they want to do people photography, they have to be very charismatic and outgoing. And the reality is, I've found the best portrait photographers, or my favorite ones, are often very introverted.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think when you're an introvert, it makes you have high levels of empathy, of observation, of compassion, all these different qualities, which make you realize how awkward and difficult and tough the portrait situation is. Then that creates space and allows magic to happen. Would you agree with that? Or how has your own being an introvert affected what you create? Maybe.
Oh, you absolutely hit the nail on the head. If I would want to do a portrait with somebody, I would want to sit with them for a bit and, find out who they are. I'm good one-on-one. Put me in a crowd and it's a little bit, like I have a limit of how much I can take. And I think the reason I don't like crowds and why my introvert nature works for me is I want to connect to one person. I don't have this desire to take it all in. I'm happy with one person. If I have to go to an event or a party, if I can go off to the side and get to know one person, I feel like I've accomplished what I want to accomplish. I like to go deep, not wide. So when it comes to portraiture, it's the same thing. I don't want to be editing the face of somebody that I don't know who they are. I don't like people as objects. That's why I think I'm not really attracted to editorial magazine type work, because I need to connect to the person more than just the pretty picture. And
Yeah.
so, like, if I were to shoot for a catalog or something, I would feel really empty just because I would feel like it's not filling that part of me that picked up a camera to begin with.
Yeah. And let me jump in there real quick. There are two things you said. I want to go deep rather than wide. And then after shooting, let's say, catalog work, I would feel empty. And the reason why I want to go there is part of this is about how can we make the most with this time that we have right now, which
Yeah.
is we're all limited, right? And one of the things I think we can do, I've had other people say this as well, is we can really reflect on what kind of photography we want to do. Who are we?
Mhm.
And how does that shape what we want to do? And so the question is, how did you discover that you like deep versus wide? Or how did you realize that like this shooting isn't fulfilling? And what advice do you have people to try to find the thing that does match who they are? Because you seem to have a
Oh,
good ability getting people there.
I think one of the things that I like to convey as a photographic instructor is for people to dig deep into what they can do that really fulfills them. And when my children were smaller, so let's go back like 8 to 10 years, my kids were a lot littler. And I had this thing in my head that in order to authentically capture my life, I had to have all 4 children in the frame. And I was a really stressed out person. At that time, I didn't feel like I was doing the right job as a photographer, and I was following the wrong teachers. And a good friend of mine, her name's Emma Wood. She's a wonderful photographer in the UK. I'm supposed to be there with her right now. That trip got thwarted. But anyway, she has 7 children. And one day she sat me aside and said, you know what? You can photograph them one by one. You don't have to photograph all of your children at one time. And it just her verbally giving me the permission to engage with one person just blew me away. And from that moment on, I realized I can photograph one flower, one person. I can get connected to one thing, and I don't have to be that documentarian that captures layers of activity. I don't work well with that, and trying to be that person was just killing me. So that is kind of where it started, and it started extrapolated itself out to everything that I shoot, from people to macro or whatever it is I'm shooting, nature. I still apply that same principle.
That's wonderful. And picking up on that, there are two reflections I have is I love how you said I was following the wrong teachers. And I think that one of the things that tends to happen in this day and age with social media and everything is we follow a lot of different voices.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're conflicting and sometimes they're maybe steering us in the wrong way. So it's, I think this now is a good time to audit that. And one of the things I do is in the new year, I unfollow everyone on Instagram. I know it sounds crazy, but then I refollow people afterwards as a way to kind of say, okay, I guess it's sort of like back when we used to get magazine subscriptions. You would cancel
Yeah.
the subscription. Like I've gotten this for 3 years. Let me just cancel it for a year. I don't, I've looked at this, whatever it is, enough. Um, but anyway, so I encourage people to think about who are you following and maybe trim that down a little bit. And then the second thing I love that you said is that you got this little gem or this wisdom from someone else, and that all of us are kind of self-made photographers,
Yeah.
but at the same time, we can't do it alone. We need outside voices. And I think now is a great time to ask friends, colleagues, mentors, anyone saying like, hey, do you have any insight into what I can do differently here? And that it wasn't like she said something that was rocket science. She just said, you can photograph one at a time. And it was like, oh my gosh, that changed it.
Yeah, it did. Yeah. Yeah. I do a lot of voice work with people, visual voice, what is it they want to do. And I spend a lot of time digging in with people and trying to figure out what will make them happy with a camera. And that might involve them taking personality tests. Sometimes I'll find people that are extroverted who are trying to copy what I do, and it doesn't work because they need to have permission to be that person who wants to take in all that energy. And that's always really fun to see people thrive once they've embraced who they are. And I love it.
That's wonderful. Okay, can we try doing that? Can you do that with me? Some voice work, develop my voice.
I think that you're pretty
Well, no,
spot on already. It's you don't have much. I mean, I can see when I look at you and I see your work, I see you all over it. I don't feel like you have a lot of room to change or grow because you're really, I mean, everybody has room to grow. I should reiterate that. But I mean, I see you in your work. When I flip through your book or look through your images, I can see that back process. And I'm a big believer in kind of the subliminal nature of images. I don't know if this makes any sense, but when I initially have a student that comes in for voice work, I will look at a body of their work, say, 3 to 10 images or so, and I will just deep dive into those images. And I will look for similarities and patterns. And a lot of times people will say, how did you see that in there? And it's just a pretty analytical process of noticing that they like open composition or closed composition. They like this kind of tonality of color, or I just look at those and see. And a lot of times people will give me 3 to 10 images that are completely disjointed. One will be a kid's softball game, and one will be a macro, but I can see similarities and the way that they're approaching it, kind of the subliminal subconscious, I should say, not subliminal, subconscious choices that they make. And when I pull that out, they'll be like, "Oh, I had no idea," and they can better embrace who they are because they're seeing the things that I'm seeing now. But when I see your work, I see a calm, gentle spirit, connected, quiet, unrushed. I guess that's the same thing, but intense, but in a very soft, genuine way. Not in an edgy intensity, but a very soft, genuine, friendly intensity, like a genuine concern. I can see your concern for the person you're shooting coming through in the images. And that would be something I would point out. Had you been new, like if you were in your first couple of years of shooting, you may be doing that already and not aware of it. So that would be something I would pull out.
I love it. I love it. And then what would be an area you would say, Chris, this might be a good growing edge for you, or this might be something worth exploring? Where would
I
you?
would I would love to see how you would interpret with your voice and vision um, a little bit more of your environment. Like I know you like to surf, right? I
Yeah.
see the surfboard back there, and you do some, but it's usually there's a person in it. I would love to see how you interpret more just the ocean alone without, how you would embrace the things that mean a lot to you. And you do such wonderful work with your daughters. I'd love to see even more of that. Um, because I don't know, there's such a light that shines through your girls. So you
I
have
love
3
that.
girls, right?
Yeah, I have 3 girls, and we're at 8, 13, and 15.
Oh my goodness, is the 15-year-old hard? My 15-year-old is driving me crazy.
Yeah.
I love her to death, but it's like, with the boys, it was different. I had 3 older boys, and when they hit puberty in between, 12 and 18, it was hard, but it was predictable. Like, they all kind of followed a pattern. My daughter is just like, one day she's the sweetest, coziest, cuddliest thing. The next day she's got all fangs. And I'm like, I don't understand. I'm sure I was the same way, but 15 is hard.
Yeah, no, I'm enjoying it. She's amazing, lots of spirit and spunk and personality and character. And, like in any age, I feel like I learn so much from my kids. And,
Yeah.
like one thing, I've shared this story before, but I don't take a lot of pictures of my kids as they've gotten older. I find when they're younger, you can take a lot of pictures, but then as they get older, it's a little bit more about relating to them just as a dad or as a person versus a photographer.
It
I'm
is.
not going to make them like my models, when we're out on a hike. They'll often say, you can take a picture, Dad, but you can't post or share it. And I'm like, fair.
I hear that all the time, except it's the opposite. You can take a picture and post it, right?
Yeah.
They're always, my sons especially. My daughter not so much, because she's her helping me with conferences started when she was really little, and she's a very good listener. She's good with 30 people pointing cameras at her. So it is very much a job for her when we do it. So at home, it's hard to get her to just be spontaneous. If she's baking cookies and I start to shoot, she's like striking a pose. And I'm like, wait, just do your thing. This is just for me. I have to say, this is just for us. This is just for us, not for Instagram or anything. And then occasionally she'll go through the resulting images and be like, you can post that one if you want.
Yeah. I'll get that
It has to be.
approval. When you get the approval, you're like, okay.
It
I
has
had
to
this
be collaborative.
I had this experience where my daughter got her braces off. This is a little while ago now, and she said, Dad, will you take a photo for Instagram? I was like, of course. Are you kidding me? She's asking me to take her picture, right? So we go out into the backyard, and I'm taking photos, and she's like, Dad, you can't take pictures like that. And I'm thinking, what do you mean? And she's like, you can't make it look like this is a photo shoot, like we're trying. And it actually was this great lesson for me, because what I realized is, I have all these kind of methods or my bag of tricks or all the techniques that I like to use. And really it's a way to craft, but you might also say that's the positive side, as a craft. On the negative side, maybe it's also control, right? It's
Oh,
like,
yeah.
yeah, I want to influence the situation and versus letting it happen. And I think what she was saying in her own teenage way was, Dad, let's just let this happen and be more organic and spontaneous. And it was this great moment for me where I said, you know what? I need to allow more spontaneity into what I'm doing. And I think it's, you know what I mean? And so I learned this great
Yeah.
photo lesson from my daughter. And it's more, I think, in photography, I think of it maybe a little bit like music. Sometimes, let's say in music, I'm just going to piano. I play the piano, but like you go kind of minor and deep and dark, and you're playing all those things. And it's like, well, yeah, maybe I need to do something a little more in a major chord or major key, and play something more positive and upbeat and bright. And so just kind of leaning different ways. So anyway, it's fun to learn from your kids with.
Oh, they're so brutally honest. You can't
Totally.
have any kind of facade with them. They will see right through it and let you know. So
Yeah, totally.
absolutely.
Yeah, like because we both teach at conferences and stuff, and my kids have often said, like, Dad, why would someone want to listen to you at a conference?
It's so funny because I do all of these talks and tutorials and things, and I constantly get the feedback that your voice can be really soothing, which is good. My husband doesn't understand that because he gets the more shrill side of me, I suppose. We're renovating a bathroom right now, so there's lots of conversation happening. But anyway, one of the things I was afraid of was that I would have hours and hours of content, and I'll just like, people will play it just to go to sleep at night. Like my husband will say, read a book to me, and you'll put me to sleep in a second. I'm thinking, oh no, this is going to be terrible. But yeah, anyway. people have said that I do that. And it's one of those eye-opening moments and you're like, I don't know if that's a good or bad thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. And you just have to say, it just is. One of the things I've realized is, with all the social media and teaching and speaking, all different things that we do
Yeah.
is you have to develop a certain degree of self-awareness, self-understanding, self-reflection, and all this stuff that can easily, though, turn into self-absorption, like you care too
Yes.
much about things. And,
Yeah.
and I was hanging out with another Sony artisan, Chris Burkhardt, and we were talking about Instagram, and I was kind of wrestling with it. And and he has, I don't know what, 3 million something
I know.
followers, something, a huge number.
Different. Well, yeah.
Yeah. And what I realized was I was taking it more seriously with my followers, which is very small comparatively, than he was with his followers. And it was just sort of this way of just reminding me, Chris, lighten up, like
Mhm.
this is okay, or even like you're saying with your voice, it may be very soothing. It's like, you know what, it is. And I'm going to go with
Yeah.
that, and that's what we have to do as artists, right? We have to
Yeah.
literally trust our own voice, be who we are. And the more we're that, the better off we will be and the
Mhm.
world will be, right?
Exactly. And knowing how you relate to your audience in your best way is good. I mean, being something you're not would never be advantageous. We can't be that way. And yeah, yeah. I don't know how I would be with 3 million people. I would overanalyze it to death, I'm sure. And I pretty much know most of the people that follow me. I mean, I have a very high end of back end conversations that happen with people. So that's the way I like it. I don't know. Social media, I struggle so much with it because as an introvert, it's not really, I don't know. I don't think in different time and place, they put us back in the 1990s. I think I would have been better there. This whole social media thing is completely, it's a struggle. I'm not going to lie. It's a
Yeah, it
struggle.
is. It is. And I think leaning into that and realizing that and being aware of that is fine. That's part of it, right? And I
Yeah.
think back to all the students I've taught too, is that, and let me just try to think of some analogy. I can't think of anything but rock climbing right now because it's just on my mind for some reason, long story short. But I think it's like someone, let's say, who's trying to rock climb and they're just like, oh, this isn't hard, I'm just going to do it. And then they do it and they keep falling. And you have to say, no, okay, you know what? This is a really hard climb. Let's slow down. Let's think about it. Let's talk about it. Let's process it. Because I think that's the trouble with social media, right? It's not kind of popular to say, I have a tough time with it. But yeah, get
Right.
that and then say why. What are 5 reasons why you have a tough time with it? And that's kind of what I did with after I was talking with Chris. And then what he got me to do is to flip the conversation a little bit. He said, well, what do you really enjoy about it? Like what? And really, I was like, nothing, but then I said, okay. I said, it's the friendships. I can
Yeah.
count very distinct friendships that I have. Like you said, even with followers, like one person in Italy we messaged because of Instagram and they've been talking about their situation and we're, or other deeper friendships I have that I do things with. And I thought, you know what? This is like an engine for connecting with people and developing and creating relationships and friendships. And for that, I'm in. For all the
Yeah.
other stuff, I don't really care. Like I don't, it doesn't matter to me, likes,
Right.
dislikes, all that kind of stuff. So
Absolutely. Yeah. There was a time when there was a push for different projects I was doing where I had to use social media. And I remember being at an event trying to figure out Instagram stories. They're like, you need to story this. I'm like, what? I don't even know how to do that. And so I'm trying to Google how to do a story on Instagram. And I felt like an old fuddy duddy. But at the same time, I'll get little tidbits where someone says, hey, Instagram has a voice message function. So if you like someone's work, go give them a voice message and say how much you like their image and why, and introduce yourself and say, a little bit about yourself and build them up a bit. And I thought, that's smart. You can use it as a way to connect. So it is kind of not less focus on algorithms and building, audience and numbers and all of that, and more relationship building. And that kind of turned it on its head. And when I start to get down that deep hole of, oh, I just don't like doing this, my husband will be like, well, what about this friend that you've had for the last 5 years that you met on Instagram? And he has a great way of kind of putting me back in my place. And I'll realize, yeah, there's a lot of good. And so let's focus on the good and not focus on, I can't beat the algorithm. I'm not nerdy enough to care.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think also the other side is to not get overly influenced by the algorithm. Meaning,
right.
I have a few friends who are, kind of famous on Instagram, and they're like, watch, I'm going to post this image and it's just going to go off the charts. And they know like the formula that will do that. And they're like, watch, this image is one of my favorites. No one's going to like it. No one does, but as artists, we have to say, yeah, we do have to be aware of people's response to things, but some of this stuff you just have to do just because with no purpose in mind. I mean, you know what I mean? No, like I'm not winning people over or something, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. There was a recent conversation I had with a good friend of mine who's a professional photographer, and she said, "Oh, I want to share this picture, but it's going to wreck my gallery. It's going to mess up the flow of what I have. I do this and then this and then this, and this is what works for my audience." And one day, a good friend of mine did a watercolor painting of me. And she did this little thing, gave it to me. So I took a picture of it and I put it up on my Instagram, and she said, "Why did you do that? You wrecked your gallery. It wrecked the flow." And I'm like, no, I want to have organic, authentic, like I want it to be me. And I really appreciate what you did for me. And in light of that, I had read several articles recently that said that the curated gallery is sort of moving more toward an organic, real interaction. Like the move is kind of going away from the super curated, formulaic way of looking at it, and that people are seeing through that now. There've been enough years of that, and people are wanting to just see your life. And there's always this pendulum swing. So I think keeping the pulse of that is helpful. But also, if your values don't line up with the current way to achieve it, then back burnering it, or just not getting caught up in that is good too. But I'm kind of excited that more authentic connection is becoming more popular.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, figuring out tools or methods or strategies to make it work for you. And I think kind of what I'm hearing you say too is we have to bring ourselves to these different platforms. Same thing like in photography. It's like not the camera and the lens. We all know that, right? It's like who is holding it and what they have inside of them and what they're bringing forth. And there are ways to do that. Like one of the things I've done recently is I hired a college kid who runs an app called Later for me, which basically is all the posting on my social media.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And so I have to create all the comments and I create all the content. And then, so essentially her job is to metaphorically kind of like water the plants, like schedule the, like the posts just come out. Because what happens for me is I get really indecisive. I have a photo.
Yeah.
I'll be like, wait, should I post it? Should I not? Wait, I need to call Carolyn. I'm just not even going to post it. I don't even care,
Right.
And so building that, like, I don't know, sprinkler system. I don't know if that analogy works, but it for me has been really nice. And then it's helped me to experiment a little bit too, where I can have images scheduled out and I'm posting them and sharing them. And I can see the responses a little more objectively. So when something goes live, it's not like, oh my gosh, no one loved that image. It's like, wow, no one liked that. That's interesting. Why is that? So creating a little distance, because I think I attach myself too closely to my work. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, I do it too. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, that's a really good point. I should use something like that to schedule. I'm very haphazard with my social media. I think I need to do better with that. But so this person works for Later or developed Later?
Oh no, yeah, sorry, maybe I said that wrong. No, so you can just sign up for the app Later, and then she manages that side of the process
for you.
Yeah,
got it.
Yeah. So and she's stoked to have a job that pays well and she can do whenever she wants. And I'm really happy because it takes it takes a little bit of the pressure off of me, because I used to feel this pressure, like I'm like, oh my gosh, I haven't posted for so many days. I got, people say you have to feed the gram. And then I think, well, yeah, I do, but this one isn't right. And that last one, and I would I would just overthink
Yeah.
everything,
Yeah.
and, just, so anyway, I guess I'm saying that, not that this is right for everyone, but what I've found in photography is learning the right mix is so important. Like some people, the right mix is carrying 3 cameras and 6 lenses, but then I see other people bogged down by that mix. And I just say, you know what? I see you as kind of a 1 camera, 1 lens person. Go with that camera, go with the 50,
Yeah. Yeah.
create like that. Or like your friend had said, you can photograph 1 person, you have to photograph all 4 kids, And so finding the right fit really is one of the secrets to getting good at all of this stuff, because there's a million ways to do it. And if we try to do a million things and be a million people, it doesn't work.
Absolutely, absolutely. In fact, my husband just commented to me the other day. He said, "You are really happy right now. I haven't seen you this happy in so long." And creating content that is important to me. Usually, I was at the service of somebody else. We need content about this, or we need content for that. And so I was always trying to please other people with my work. And this is the first time in many years that I have just sat down and thought, "What do I want to do?" And it's been really, really interesting to see. It's not less work. In fact, it's considerably more, but I'm touching on topics and doing things that really make me excited. I'm not trying to fit somebody else's brand, which
Yeah,
is awesome.
I
Yeah.
love that. I love
Yeah.
that. One of the things that makes me think of, and this is so fun to talk to. I love this back and forth. I could do this all day, and I
I
can't
know, me
wait
too.
to see your new courses and stuff. But
Yeah.
when I was a teacher in like a brick and mortar photography school, I used to start off one of my classes with an exercise where I said, draw a house, and they would draw a house, and then I'd say, share it with the person sitting next to you. And it always was a square with a triangle on top, house.
Yeah.
And they were all kind of sheepish, and all their houses looked horrible. And then I said, okay, now flip your paper over. I want you to draw a house. And this time I want you to include elements, like geographically. Is it in the mountains? Is it near the beach? Is there a pool? Is there a hot tub? Is there a helicopter? What are the cars in it? How many floors? Are there people there? Is there a park? Just basically make
Yeah.
the house you want to live in. And they would all of a sudden, the first drawing was like, barely drawing tentatively. The second one, they're just like into it, working so hard, going around, doing all this stuff. And I would talk over while they're drawing. And then they would show it to their friends. The whole class is erupting and talking and laughing and all this kind of stuff. And I would do that just to say that the second time you actually worked harder, but it was easier. So it's that strange paradox that happens, I think, in creativity when we're doing something that means something to us, which is what you were just talking about. It is sometimes more work, but at the same time, it's less and it's better, and everyone wins.
Yeah.
The output, or the
Yeah.
final product's better. So that's a really important thing, I think, because part of it is finding. It's like you were saying earlier, finding who we are and bringing that into the work, and that's where it ignites all kinds of wonderful things.
Oh yeah. I've known photographers who, because a person can be technically good at something that they don't love. You can get educated and learn how to do something really well, say weddings. I know a lot of people who can do a wedding, but it was stressful. Usually it was against their personal energy. Like they're an introvert like me, but they have to get out there and manage everybody and manage everything, and they're good at it, but then they burn out. And I'm often trying to push people into, just because you are good at something, is this what you're meant to do? Is this the work you're meant to create? And of course we all have to pay the bills, so there's that to factor in as well, but to feed who they are. And a lot of times people will be like, I love landscapes. I had somebody who did weddings, and then they said, I love landscapes. I had no idea, and they just never gave themselves permission, because they went into photography looking at it as a career. Where can I make money with this little black box? And eventually, switched out of that to more quiet endeavors. And even if you can't do it financially, if you have to do one thing that's kind of against your grain to pay the bills, to have an avenue where you're just super passionate and excited, because then it makes you not hate that little black box. And
Yes, yes. And maybe tying that to our current times is that
Yeah,
often I think that kind of a recalibration or realizing you're talking about the friend who did weddings but realized they loved landscape. I feel like a lot of those things in my own life, I've come to awareness of things when stuff gets difficult because you
hmm,
kind of skate through life or you're distracted or we're doing all this. And right now we're in a very difficult time and probably going
it
to get
is.
worse by everyone's projection.
Yeah.
And it's a good time to kind of reflect, I think, on, well, who am I? Why am I? What do I really want to do? Because we've been given the gift of a pause and a moment
Hmm.
to do that.
I love how you phrase it, a gift of a pause. I know a lot of people are stressed out right now. Uh, it's funny because, so I assume you work from home, right?
Yes, I do. Yep.
Well, my husband doesn't, and he has one of the essential jobs where he has to leave. And I was like pouting because I was like, "Can't you work from home?" Because I want that family together time, and I was trying to harness that. And I realized I have to let that go because, uh, you know, but it's an interesting time because everybody is re-establishing. My husband's probably going to work more hours because of the situation, and some people are struggling because my sons both work at jobs where the places where they work are closed, so they're home now just wondering what to do. My 18-year-old is wondering, do I file for unemployment? What do I do? And so it's been an interesting, it's really a study in how to manage fear, you know and it's I don't like to be afraid ever, so it's been a great exercise in managing that and not getting into that headspace of fear and just keeping a positive spin on it and keep moving forward in a positive way. It's been a great reset for the rubber meets the road when it comes to all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's go there a little bit. So for the
Yeah.
person who is feeling discouraged and fearful, and rightly so because of limits and work and those kind of things. In particular, here we're really talking to creatives and
Yeah.
a lot of photographers.
Yeah.
Um, what thoughts or encouragement or ideas do you have for that person?
I actually think that this is a huge opportunity. I come from a long line of inventors, people who have patents on different things, nothing really interesting, but, farm equipment from the early 1900s and stuff. But what I can say is that when you are forced into a position like this, you can start to look for gaps. What needs to be filled? What would make my life easier in this way? And not necessarily just inventions, but curriculum if you're a teacher, or photography gear. Maybe you're somebody who wants to design a modifier or a better camera bag, or you have time to put into the things that you may have backburnered. um, People's creativity, the things that they have back there, start to come forward when you have this gap of time and a slight bit of desperation. And I would love to see the creativity that comes out of this, which can potentially be a negative spot. I would love to see what people come up with, and I think this will birth a lot of really good ideas. Better ways to communicate online, better ways to work at home, better ways to work in a home studio, better ways to sell portraits. Like Paul Giroux, he's another Sony artisan. He started to do a series of family portraits of people sitting on their porches. I don't know um, how that all came about. I haven't talked to him about it, but it was mentioned to me. And so he's doing these distant portraits of families, from the social distancing. Creativity comes out of this situation, and that is so inspiring to me. So while we're not always excited about the things that cause personal growth, challenges that cause personal growth, I do embrace it and realize that it does have a benefit if we let it.
Yeah, I love that. That's wonderful to hear. And I think there's so many precedents to that as well. One person that comes to mind is John Muir, and
Yeah.
I don't know if you know hit the story about when he was filing something, and the part of it, on like a grinding stone, part of the file piece went into his eye, and
Oh,
he went blind, and it's called empathetic blindness. He lost sight in both of his eyes for 30 days or something like that. I'm not sure if I'm getting the details exactly right. But when he had lost sight or lost something, he then realized, okay, I know what I'm going to do with my life. And then when his vision healed and was restored, he started on his big first walk, and that's kind of started everything for the rest of his life and what he did, and really made such a huge change in the world. And there's people like him and many others who have taken down times, whether it's the skier who broke her leg and missed the Olympics, and then that opened up
Mm-hmm.
the opportunity for something else or whatever it is. And I think the down times, like you said, it does give us a little bit of desperation. It does give us a little bit of openness. We're less distracted, obviously. And the
Yeah.
desperation part gives us a sense like we got to fight. Like I've always figured there are these two sides of creativity. I wrote a book called The Creative Fight. So there's the fight side. And one day I want to write a book called The Creative Flow. And those, you're never in just one or just the other forever. You're not like, I don't know about for you, but for me, there's seasons where I am just fighting. Like it's not happening. Or in a portrait session, I'm working on nothing, like the images are horrible. Other times you can't help but create great work. And you're almost like, oh my gosh, like, did you guys see that?
Right.
This is great. Everything's perfect.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I think culturally and globally, we have those seasons as well. So anyway, I mean, just adding to what you're saying there too, is thinking that, um, there is opportunity here, and this isn't belittling how difficult it is. It's not
No.
putting on a fake smile. It's about honoring it and saying, okay, yeah, this is tough. And I also think it's about honoring the people who are suffering worse. I think those
Yeah.
people, rather than have us sit in a corner and cower and cry or something, they would say, stand tall, be who you're meant to be. The world needs us to stand up right now in every
Yeah.
way that we can. And sometimes we can't make a difference directly, but we can become our best selves. We can create work. We can inspire, motivate others, and we can collectively, move ahead.
Absolutely. It's really an interesting time because it's affecting so many people, and it really makes a person hyper aware of, hey, things are okay. I'm still working, my husband's still working. And so what can I do to help people who are in a different situation? It's really, yeah, there's a lot of positive good because you feel like there's actionable change that you can take on with clear direction. You know exactly what you can and cannot do to help other people, and you can just jump into that. And then other people, just need inspiration. People get down. And I was watching something that Brooke Shaden was doing. She's doing classes in her house and getting people inspired. And it makes me think back to the different, like World War II, the Hollywood industry boomed because people needed to get out of the depressive state that the world was in, and they needed an hour and a half to, and we can maybe be that for people too, and to not belittle the things that we can offer. Giving somebody a brain escape may not seem like a really, deep and important thing to do, but it is, so it just helps us to tap into the different ways that we can help people and think outside the box.
Yeah. And I liked your idea earlier too, which you included about Instagram and sending someone a message just to encourage them what they're doing.
Yeah.
Even if we're not teaching or doing something like that, we can always send notes to each other, whether it's in a more modern
Yeah.
way like that, or
Yeah.
letters or anything, emails or different things that we can do to encourage people. Because here's what I know. There's times when I've been really, really down, and a friend will do something for me, which is very simple, or I'll get an anonymous email, anonymous meaning like I don't know the person. They'll just say,
Right. Mm-hmm.
hey, I read your book and it really moved me, and here's why. And it will literally like pull me through the day.
Yep.
And or a friend will buy me a sandwich or something, and I just think you have no idea like how much I needed that. I didn't even know how much I needed that. And so
Yeah.
I think in our world right now, we never know what's going on and how people are struggling or suffering. And with that, it's not that we need to be heroes and save the world, but a little bit of kindness goes a
Yeah,
long way.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I don't think either of us would I've tried, I'm not a mean or angry person hardly ever, and I don't think you are either. And I think sometimes this gives us, I know I'm like you too. I kind of go deep inside and I can get down, and I don't share that with the world. And I think that we can recognize that in other people and, say, I wonder how this person's doing, because they're a lot like me. I wonder if they're just sitting in their house, bored to tears, and bored people with a lot of time on their hands can become depressive people.
Yeah.
Uh, And I don't, this is a little bit off on topic, but maybe a little off, but my sister just had a double lung transplant, where both lungs were replaced, and she's 40. And so she had been housebound for a long time. And with this whole virus thing going on around, she's still housebound. So just making a mental note every day to reach out and see how she's doing, because she hasn't left the house in months, post transplant. And how many other people are housebound, maybe elderly people who are housebound. Can we go get, I don't know if you can get groceries anymore. But anyway, how can we help people that might be stewing in their own worries? It's something that's really heavy on my heart right now.
Yeah. And how can we use all this technology and all this stuff in a way to reach out to
Yeah.
them? I mean, sometimes it's as simple as, for
Yeah.
me with my parents, like FaceTiming and showing them the kids making cupcakes or something, or goofing
Yeah.
around, or they did this thing where they, they're all kind of stuck together, so to speak. But so my oldest decided that they should put pillows in the bathtub, and they put pillows and blankets. They turned our bathroom into like a lounge area almost. And they all piled in there and read books and played games and watched a movie and just FaceTimed that to my parents. And they thought that was hilarious. But yeah, just taking that little bit of extra effort to do those things. And then with us, I think too, as a photographic community, to remember that as small business owners, there are a lot of people out there who their business has just been shut down. The wedding photographer, like weddings are canceled or whatever it
Right.
is.
Yeah.
And to realize, yeah, we need to stick together. We need to support each other. Sometimes it's simple. Other times it could be more involved, but to kind of bring that awareness into the situation. And
Yeah.
because I think part of being an artist, I think you would agree with this, is that we are called to be aware of things that the rest of the world may ignore. And part of that means
I would
deeper
agree.
emotions, right?
Yes, yes. Oh, absolutely. I think being a photographer definitely primes you to be aware of all the subtle cues that people give. We're almost psychologists in a little bit of a way. My mother was a psychologist, so I grew up being a human experiment, and so so I've always been fascinated with human behavior and all of that. But anyway, definitely something that we can harness and tap into.
All right. Well, couple more questions for you. We're getting closer
Okay.
to the end here, but
Okay.
one of the things is, how can we keep our creative spirit alive right now? And you're so good at practicing that without being in a major city or traveling to far off distant corners of the world. And you seem to bring creativity to where you are in a really unique way, whether that's your macro work or the photographs that we've already talked about. But I'm
Mhm.
looking to hear a few ideas about how I and how we can keep that creative spirit alive within the confines that we are all currently in.
Oh, well,
Give us some wisdom.
okay. Well,
Give
for
us an
sure.
assignment too, maybe.
Okay, well, for sure. One of the things that I encourage my students to do, I had a class called The Art of Observation, which I ran for years, and I'm still kind of running it. I'm reworking it into a new incarnation of it. But one of the things is to learn to not reject or diminish the normal, the everyday, to take a walk and make a concerted effort to see with new eyes, because we have this ability to become blind to what is around us. And it's always fascinating when somebody from out of town will come in and they'll be like, oh, your prairie is so beautiful. I'm like, oh, there's no trees, it's blah. And someone comes in and they give me a new shot of inspiration because I see it through their eyes and I see something different. So sometimes we can consciously get into that, and now being kind of housebound, we're not bound from hiking trails. Sometimes there are places outdoors that aren't closing, at least in my local area. So getting out and being observant, slowing down, taking time is key. And it takes mental effort. You can't just be what you've always been. You have to slow down and really see and really pay attention, to try to breathe new life in. Also, exploring other hobbies that you can integrate into photography. For instance, I love macro photography, so now I am diving into seed catalogs. I'm planting seeds. I'm photographing the process. So if you like to, you know, do woodworking, or if you play music, figure out how you can integrate that into a picture. Don't think on the same genres that you've always done. How can you integrate stuff that you're super passionate about and integrate the camera into that? Also, just doing a light study. I know this sounds really maybe silly or too easy, but for a year when I was going through a really sad time, I had some serious issues with one of my children that led me to a kind of a deep depression. I just photographed the light. I'd get up early and look at it coming through the windows. I would look at it at night. I would look at the street lights, and I would photograph just the light. I didn't make myself find a subject. I didn't make myself find anything particularly beautiful. I just chased the light. And in doing so, I was almost metaphoric in the way that I was looking for the light at the end of the tunnel. And it was a process that made me see, there's beauty everywhere. And we don't need to be in some far-flung part of the world to find it. The irony is you can make as beautiful images in your own boring house as you can on the other side of the world, if you try to see it through the eyes of somebody who might be seeing it for the first time.
I love it. I love it. The last part, if you try to see it through the eyes of someone who's seen it for the first time, that's helpful. Yeah. It reminds me a little bit of a time I was in Switzerland and I was hiking. I was in college. I was a college student studying abroad, and I was in the Swiss Alps in the most beautiful place I'd ever seen in my life. Came upon someone on the trail, and she was a local to the little nearby village. And we struck up a conversation, where are you from? Oh, I'm going to school in Santa Barbara, and talked about, that a little bit. And I said, where are you from? Here. And I said, oh, this is so beautiful. And she said, yeah, but it doesn't have an ocean.
See. Yeah, that is so true. I love trees. I love forests. I would love to live in a place that had trees and forests and the ocean, but I don't. I have an ocean of grass. I have the prairie, and I have to reframe the way I see it every year, because it doesn't have the things that I would naturally choose. If somebody said, where do you want to live anywhere in the world? It probably wouldn't be here. But a lot of people say, wow, you make the prairie so beautiful. It's because I really struggle and fight the fight to see the beauty that it does have, and reframe it that way.
And I think herein lies one of the most important parts of photography, which is it's never about what's in front of your lens. It's always about what you're bringing to the situation.
Yes, absolutely.
I think popular photography tends to propagate the alternative idea that says you need to have a beautiful model, or you need to go to that one desert location, the racetrack, or you need to go where all the hot air balloons are launching. You need to, whatever exciting or interesting thing is, which all those things, they're not bad, but you can't rely on them. And I think now is a really interesting time to get back to that. Like you're encouraging us to do, is to say, it really is about working hard at it and bringing something to that. And I love how even, in talking, you said you have your ocean of prairie, or I forget how you just had said that, but
ocean of grass. Yeah.
Ocean of grass. Yeah. Yeah. I like that metaphor. And I like how you encouraged me too, to even earlier, without knowing it, you gave me that same assignment of saying, I would love to see you integrate more of the things that you love, like the ocean. And it's funny that it's here, but I don't photograph it a lot. And here it is, so beautiful and amazing. So it's not like I even have a good excuse, whether it's beautiful and amazing or uninteresting and dull. Our task as photographers is to see deeply and to express and to look and discover and be curious and all those things. So those are some wonderful, wonderful words. And
awesome.
Yeah, and it's so fun to get a chance to talk and to hear some of your thoughts and ideas. It is very calming and comforting.
Well, it's been awesome to talk to you. I was really looking forward to it because, your book, The Creative Fight, is one of my favorite books. So I can relate to I just knew we'd have a lot to talk about.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. That book was such a labor of love. It's so funny. That's a whole nother story, but well, I'll tell just a little bit of it maybe, is that as I was writing, I was one chapter in, and my editor, who had been a dear friend, or is still a dear friend, we had done, I think, maybe 4 books up to that point together. She said, I'm leaving my job. And
Oh, wow.
basically I didn't have an editor for the rest of it. I had someone take over, but it wasn't, and they weren't, I was doing, and at the same time, I had been in a certain space and I lost that space, and my teaching, the place where I was teaching, I had left. So all these things that were difficult were happening.
Mm-hmm,
So,
mm-hmm.
which obviously the universe does that, so that I
Yeah.
was in
Yeah.
the crucible of the fight, writing about the
Yeah.
fight, versus from the mountaintop looking back, like, oh, back then it was tough. It's like, no,
Yeah,
this
no,
is tough.
it comes through. It comes through. I think the genuineness of the struggle comes through, and I think that's something to embrace. We can, it's relatable. We all struggle, and anybody who says, "Oh, this is just easy, this is great," I mean, it might be on the surface, but I think we all go home at night and go, "Oh, this is
Yeah.
hard,"
Yeah.
and it's hard no matter what you're doing.
Yeah.
If
And
you're
the thing with the hard too, sorry to cut you off there, but was
no,
just
it's
that
fine.
I always encourage people to lean into the hard. Like, why is it hard? What is hard about this? And
Mhm.
like you were talking about the person who's photographing weddings and it's not feeding their soul and it's exhausting them. Say like, well, because most people will say, oh, it's the weddings. Oh, you don't like working with the brides, bridezilla. It's like, well, no, I love brides, but I don't like what? Tell me the 3 things you don't like. And
Exactly.
I kind of learned that from shooting for a brand called Patagonia. And I don't know if they still do this, but back when I had just started there, that they're doing stuff with them, they gave a list of 10 things you can't have in a photograph. So you can't have plastic, you can have power lines, fences, cars, all these things. And so they had this list of no, and that brought you to a yes. And so when you look at their
Mhm.
work, if you go online and search, you're like, wow, it all looks the same, even though it's shot by people all over the world, all different places. But
Uh-huh.
the no gets to the yes. And so that's where I think even with the difficulty, it's like, well, what is it? What are the no's here? What are the things that are like,
Oh, that's brilliant.
yeah,
That's brilliant. That is actually part of the voice course that I teach, is learning what to say no to.
hmm,
And yeah, yeah. It's assumed, a lot of things are assumed, that people operate on the assumptions, I should be shooting this way or whatever. If you can say with confidence, I do not want to photograph that. Like, I don't like to photograph plastic at all. There's just something as simple as, I don't like to photograph anything that is, if I can define what I don't like, it's so much easier to embrace what I do like, and everything sort of falls into line after that. So I get what they're doing with that, making sure that people understand their hard no's. Um,
yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah,
one
that's
of the
good.
ways, like, I mean, just to keep going with this for a little bit, is one of the ways I've kind of developed that practice in my own life is I create a yes no list. So I get a piece of
Mm-hmm,
paper,
mm-hmm,
put a line right down the middle. And I'll have my students do this as well, because
mm-hmm.
sometimes it's hard to say, well, what do I say yes to? Because you ask people, what music do you like? I kind of like everything. They don't like
Right.
everything,
They don't.
what kind of
No.
food? Well, I can eat anything. It's like, well, can you eat anchovies right now? No, no, it's horrible. So the yes, no gives a way to like kind of compare. So, it could be, one of mine is no to plastic and yes to unfinished wood. Hence my cabin that I built in my backyard here. It's all unfinished
I
wood.
love it. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. But then photographically, and a whole list of things like that. No to electric guitar, yes to acoustic, no to an RV, yes to backpacking. And it's not that those things, they're all metaphors, they're all analogies.
Right. Right.
They
Right.
don't, those things are all fine and wonderful. But what then does is it builds association, and it says, like for me with wood, with all the wood around here, I think a lot of photography, and it's great, a lot of great photography and a lot of construction, my dad's builds homes, is wood painted over, and you don't see the grain, you don't see where the branches were, you don't see the knots, you don't see the history, you don't see the rings of growth in it. And right now I can see all that here and smell it. And so for me, photographically, I'm like, no, I want to make sure I'm not putting veneer on. I want it to be raw. I want it to be blemished, because wood, like I don't know if you can see the back of mine, but all the little
Yeah.
knots, those are all little branches, and inherently saying blemishes are okay. And so it's kind of like, that's how I
Yeah.
retouch photographs. Like, I'm not going to, like, every freckle isn't a problem. I love freckles, and I love, you know,
So does my husband.
because,
He's funny. Yeah, because when you're retouching someone, and my husband's like, "Why would you remove a freckle? Why would you remove freckles?" He doesn't understand at all. He's adamantly, the same way. And it's incidentally, my husband's a woodworker as well. The cabinets in this kitchen that are in front of me, actually, they had a walnut tree that they cut down because it
mm,
was dead, and he made the cabinets in the kitchen from that walnut
oh my
tree.
gosh.
And so it's natural finish with the grain and the knots and everything. So I completely understand what you're saying.
Yeah, you're getting the
Yeah,
connection. And if
I
you
speak
don't
in your
like
language.
woodwork, forget all that. But maybe the point is just think about your yes no list, and then let
Yeah,
that affect and guide and direct the type of other creative stuff you want to do. And
absolutely.
otherwise, we're just kind of shooting blind, and we're hoping for the best. And that usually
Yeah,
doesn't work. Or if it does, it takes us so much time. It takes a decade. Way to speed up your growth, I've always found, is to add some clarity to it.
absolutely. Yes. Don't waste years doing something you don't love. And
Love it.
yeah,
Let's
yep,
end there. Don't waste years doing something you don't love. Is that how you said it?
yep.
All right.
That's
Well,
perfect.
Carolyn, thank you so much. Let's do this again. This is so fun. I really appreciate you, your work, your creativity, your encouragement, and it is so inspiring to me. I have a macro lens because of you. You inspired me to do that, so I need to
Maybe
get
I'll
it
get you
out.
shooting more with it. Yeah, no, just
I
kidding.
do. I need
Whatever.
to. Yeah.
All
And
right. Thank you so much, Chris.
yeah, and have a great rest of your day. And we'll look forward to seeing some of the training you're creating. And I'll also obviously share that you can follow along Caroline Jensen, and her name is spelled just like it sounds. And thanks so much.
Thank you.